everyone to the first ever Life Science Connections online event. The purpose of these events is just to give graduates and students an insight into the many different careers within life science and the allied health industry. Life Science Connections is a platform that aims to help students and graduates navigate through the different careers and just figure out what it is they want to do, what experience they need, and how they can, get their foot in the door in these particular careers. So we had 5 speakers, but we have 4 speakers now. And the main purpose of this initial event is to celebrate the Black professionals that we have, as it is Black History Month, or it's the end of Black History Month. We're here to celebrate Black professionals. And we have 4 Black professionals speaking to share to give us an insight into their careers and, give some tips, if possible, how students or graduates can get into their particular field. We do have a few housekeeping rules for you all. The first one is just to make sure that you are on mute, just so that we're not interfering with speakers and the like. And also to let you know that we are recording this and we will be posting it on or uploading it on our YouTube channel. So if you don't want your face to be on our YouTube channel or on YouTube in general, then you can just take your camera off or turn your camera off, sorry. And also at the end of this event, we will be providing some feedback forms. As I mentioned initially, this is our first event. So we would like to get some feedback from you, the participants, just to find out what we could do differently and how we can better these events going forward. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is AJ, and he will be giving insight into his career.
Can you all hear me? Perfect. All right, so good evening, everyone. As Veronica said, my name is AJ, or my full name is Ajibade, and I'm an Associate Director of Pharmacovigilance, Process Excellence, and Learning Strategy in a pharmaceutical company. And so I think some of you might the first question some of you might actually have is, what is pharmacovigilance? And that is basically the science relating to the collection, detection, assessment, monitoring, and prevention of adverse effects with the products that we make. And so basically what my department does is really looking after the benefit risk profile of the drugs we have on the market and the ones we have in development, and making sure that that benefit always outweighs the risk and we can manage the risk accurately in the patient population. So I work in process development across the span of these activities, and also look after the learning strategy for our affiliate functions, which we're looking at about over 30 countries globally, and our central functions as well. So I'll give you a brief history about myself. So I was born and raised in Nigeria. I moved to the UK at the age of 18 to study. And my first degree was in pharmacology at the University of Hertfordshire. And I did enjoy that degree. I knew what I wanted to do with it. But in my final year, I realized very quickly that I didn't want to work in the labs, but I still wanted to work within the pharmaceutical industry. And so one of the first things I did was really build relationships with my lecturers. I was a course rep. And in one of my discussions with one of my mentors or one of my lecturers, she mentioned to me that she could see me working in drug safety and pharmacovigilance. And up to that point, I didn't even know that job existed. I didn't know what that role was. And I went back, did my research, and indeed it was something that I thought was something I wanted to pursue as a career. So I did start looking on LinkedIn to start making connections with people who had a career path within the industry. I started looking at specialist agencies, and I reached out to a lady who I would never forget, who she had a small consultancy firm, and she gave me my first kind of experience into what drug safety was when I left university. So I had some experience and understanding of what that was, and took that to start applying for jobs with the help of someone I got as a mentor via LinkedIn. And I got my first role in industry as a PV scientist or a pharmacovigilance scientist. And at the same time, I started my master's part-time in pharmacovigilance as well. Now, the first thing I would say is that this was a lot of work. It was hard graft doing a master's and working full-time. So I basically spent 2 years of my first 2 years of working full-time, doing a master's, and spend basically most of my annual leave off work to actually study, to get my courses done and get my assignments in. And for me, that's one of the first things I would say, that when you're looking for a job, or when you're looking at what you want to do with your degree, the fact that you've already got a degree in something doesn't limit you to that field. You can do your research, see what other career interests you based on the degree you've done, and see how you can find avenues to get into the area that you want, to look at people who've done something similar to what you've done to get you there. So I started off as a PV scientist, and I did that for a couple of years. And my next point will be looking at problems when you're working, and trying to identify problems and be a problem solver wherever you are. So with the knowledge I was gaining from my master's, I realized that there was a particular regulation that we weren't following within the company I was working for at the time. And I raised that to senior management, and they basically told me to design a process around that. And then I did that, it was approved, and I was tasked with training the entire organization on that. And from there, there was a vacancy in training, and then I got into training on pharmacovigilance, and training individuals in pharmacovigilance. And so I did that for a couple of years, and you know, one thing I'd always done was made sure my LinkedIn was up to date, even when I was not looking for a job, just to have that profile of there, and also use that network, use that platform to network, meet people, and actually get new ideas that would also help me with my role. Because like I said, one of the key things you want to be able to do when you get into a company is be able to create value for the team you're in, evolving and improving your own skills at the same time. And so with that, I got a call or a message one day for a new role in a different company, which was way above my pay, what I thought was way above my grade at the time. And I didn't actually listen to that recruiter, because I thought that role was a few levels above me, and I didn't think it was the right time for me to do that. But having read the job description and spoken to people, and I spoke to my mentors, and it was like, can you do the job? Can you do this aspect of the job? And I said yes. Can you learn the aspects of the job that you're not familiar with, given time? And I said yes. And they said, why wouldn't you apply for it? So I did that, and I went from being a senior training specialist and skipping several rows to becoming a senior manager for safety training in another pharmaceutical company. So I'm only saying that again because I know we're talking to people who are fresh out of university. We're talking to people who are still at university at the time. And I think sometimes when you come out of university, at least in my experience, you have what they say, you've got the imposter syndrome, especially when you're the first in the workplace. You're competing with people who maybe have a few years of experience above you. But I think it's important to really do your homework, do your research, build your skills, and be confident in yourself and what you can do and bring to the table as you learn on the job. So I've done that. I did that for a couple of years, and then again, looking at various areas where I can build my skill set. I would always, every year, I would always seek something out to develop myself. If it's in leadership, if it's in communication, even if it's in soft skills. Like, I know one of the areas I had issues with was emotional intelligence, for example. So in looking at yourself, you constantly have to have that self-assessment of where your skills lie, because yes, you're looking to get into the industry as a first role, but to do that, you also need to look at what skills you're bringing to the table, what roles we currently have at the moment, what skills are required for those, and then start upskilling yourself for that, and also for the future as well. So these are the things I would say, if you're looking for a job, if you're looking at progressing within a life science role, you probably will need to start from these perspectives, not having that limitation of what you've done as a degree, looking at people who you see as mentors. They might not be direct to you that but you can actually find the internet has made the world a global and a smaller place for us to connect and meet people, and use those resources that we have to actually identify where we think we might be a good fit, and then explore those areas and develop skills in those areas. So these are the main key things I would say I would have as your key pointers as you're going in. And now that I'm in the industry, I'm still developing. Like I said, I've just started a new role, and in that new role, I'm going back again to school to learn a few new things that I should be able to bring into the role. So you are never the fact that you're say in your final year of university, you've just got your degree, you never stop learning. You're continually looking to really look at what you can currently bring to the table and what you could currently provide in terms of creating value within the roles that you find yourself across whatever industry you are within the life science range. And I'm looking at the time, I'm trying to see if am I still on time in terms of time? Perfect. So I think from my perspective, I would say, you know, if you're looking at in drug safety, there are various roles that you can come in with. So you can come in as a drug safety associate, and you're basically looking at receiving adverse events that are processed or are received at a clinical trial. So if we have sites that we're running for clinical trials, any adverse event a patient who's exposed to our product is exposed to, that comes into a case processing center. And if you're looking or if you're interested in a role in drug safety, that would usually be your entry point. And the key roles you're looking there would be drug safety associate, a PV scientist, and you're looking at really database. And so you need to have strong communication skills. You're transcribing data from different sources into a safety database. And that could lead you into other roles such as the PV scientist or safety scientist who do an aggregate analysis of the data that we've collected. So that is another area that you can then, as you build skills within drug safety, then move into that from processing those adverse events to actually then analyzing those adverse events to really understand whether or not their relationship with the drugs that we're taking and the adverse events that we're seeing in that patient population. There are also other there are also other careers or other roles that you can look into, such as the medical writers. So as we collect, as we go through our clinical trial process, or even for our drugs in the market, we need to do an aggregate analysis of these adverse events that we're collecting, and we have specialist writers who we call on or who we rely on to actually support with the writing of these reports. So that's another career within drug safety that you could possibly start in as an entry role. One other key area that I think many people are not exposed to, especially when you're leaving, is there's there's a safety operations department which would usually have roles relating to compliance, have roles related to quality, and you have a range of degrees that you can use to actually get into that. So the fact that you've read biomed, or the fact that you are a pharmacist, or you did a pharmacology degree, that, you know, those are not, these degrees usually, when at least when I was at university, you don't see you see these degrees as paths to careers in those specific disciplines, but you can actually apply them to other roles such as these outside this particular disciplines that you have within the pharmaceutical industry. So like I said, in safety operations, you can have various roles from compliance to quality. You can have entry-level roles from a PV coordinator or a PV quality specialist or a PV documentation specialist, even as an entry-level roles. And these are the kind of roles that you can be looking for as you should start looking into the various paths you can take into the industry. Now, I'm also aware that we have some specialist agencies that, or specialist recruiters that specialize in entry or early years for entry-level roles. I think Ronke, in one of the events you had a few years ago, you had one particular, I don't remember I think Stephen was his name, but there was a particular agency as well that particularly worked with university students that were just graduating to place them in entry-level roles within the pharma industry. And they have these kind of roles that you can get in, develop yourself, and then build from. So I will definitely recommend that you use, you know, avenues like this, specialist recruiters like this, LinkedIn, and using your connections like around this to actually find these entry-level roles that could support you in developing, first of all, exposing you to different careers, and then developing yourself, not just niching yourself from the onset. And I think from my perspective, I'll probably pause here And if there are any questions at the end, I'll be more than happy to take them. Specifically, if you're interested in more information around drug safety itself or pharmacovigilance, or in my own personal career journey within in the industry, and I'll be happy to have conversations with anyone who's interested in that following the session today.
Thank you, AJ. That was really insightful. So just a quick one. One thing I didn't remind the participants is that we will be having a Q&A session at the end. So if you do have any questions, please send it in the chat, and during the Q&A session, we'll definitely ask the speakers. So the next speaker we have is Adeola. So yeah.
Hi everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Right, all good. Great. So I did kind of prepare like a little brief presentation just to first introduce myself. Are you able to pull that up? I could also.
Oh, yes, 1 second. Yeah, I'm putting up.
I could share as well if it's. All right, sweet. So this is a very young picture of me. Many years ago in 2013 when I graduated from uni. I studied biomedical sciences. I got a 2-1 degree, and it was like, yeah, okay, cool. What am I going to do now? Similarly to what AJ has said, I was studying biomed, and I wasn't so keen on working in the lab, and it looked like that was really the only career path whilst I was at uni. Even in doing my dissertation, I was kind of struggling with what it was that I wanted to do later. One thing I knew was that I didn't want to work in a lab with samples. I wanted to work out in the world with people. And then once graduating, started my next step in life. So next slide, please. So where it all began, I started from the bottom, literally. People might have said, like, well, you finished uni, but you didn't quite start working in the industry that you were in. So I started working in the tech. As you can see, that I started working at Apple for some time. And one thing that I'm forever grateful for is the diverse opportunities. So regardless of whatever degree you have and wherever you finish, any experience is great. Any experience will help you to your next step, because once you finish uni, you are starting in life. And working at Apple, I was exposed to so much. I learned so much about relating with people and speaking to people, and that was stuff that I really wanted to do. But then I was kind of itching to work my degree, make more use of that in the world. So I started searching around, and fortunately, some people that I went to university with still kept contact with them. One person was actually working in clinical research. So I asked, okay, could you help me? I'm looking to work more with people, and it looks like that's something that you do now. And so here's an example of the next job I got after working at Apple was at Richmond Pharmacology. That's where I started my career, working in a phase 1 unit, and it was all great. It was fun, and I learned so much that with that knowledge I was gaining about the clinical research industry and how clinical trials worked, what the patients had to go through, what we as clinical trial assistants or administrators had to do as well. It was such a great eye-opener, and I kind of wanted to figure out what happens at the top. So following Richmond Pharmacology, I then started placement at Novartis. So then even in applying to Novartis, a big pharma company, one of the top 5, it was something that was a bit daunting at first, but fortunately I had some people around me that were able to encourage me, who were already in the industry. They were able to give me some pointers as well. And you get in there and then you realize, oh wow, you may be in out of your depth. Not to worry, don't worry about that. Everyone is there to learn, and so are you. Yeah, so that's a bit of my career as it started. And moving on to the next slide, I'll show you about where I am now. Following Novartis, I took a break from work for some time, and then in restarting in 2018, in restarting in Feb 2018, I then kind of got back into the swing of how things were happening at the bottom in terms of the clinical research organizational structure. And with all my experience that I had before, even from working at Apple up until this point at Recognition Health, I was able to line manage some people as well, and also be organizing the schedules for the entire clinic. So that was quite a big chunk of responsibility. And then now I'm at AstraZeneca, a pharmaceutical, one of the top 5 pharmaceutical companies as well. And here I'm a global study management associate. So I oversee the operation of clinical trials across a range of different countries, all specific to one drug or to one therapy area. So at the moment, I am specifically in oncology, so working with cancer. And yeah, so that's a kind of like a really quick stop history to my journey in clinical research. And the last slide, actually, I'll spend a bit of time on this last slide. So bits about what I've learned along the way. I'm sure people probably asking, oh, how did you get from this place to this place? And everyone's kind of asking me as well, my friends and family, like, oh, that's really great, you've got there, but how did you do it? These are my top 5, that what I've highlighted in green are the top 5 tips that I've kind of kept on to, and I believe that they're really key to success in clinical research. There are so many people and there's so many different kinds of roles you could have. If you like working with people, if you're not so good at working with people, if you don't like to speak, or if you like to speak, there are so many roles for you, especially in clinical research. You'll find that in one pharmaceutical company, there are so many different avenues, there's so many different pockets. We, at the pharmaceutical level, we work with statisticians, we work with analysts, we work with people who are in charge of just operating samples, or people who are in charge of publishing results as well, ethics, regulatory people. So there are so many people you'll be working with. And what's most importantly, number 1, is to be your authentic self. Amongst all these people, you are unique. You are very special. And if you're there and you have an opportunity in a company to work in any position, that is both a privilege and an honor to be in such a position. And with that, say that we should aim, I personally aim to add value to whatever team I'm in, even if it is not work related. If it is work related, you don't particularly know what that experience is gonna what's the word for it, what's gonna come from that experience. So you could be working in a team with someone you don't even know, but then you later find out that they're working in the position that you'd love to be in, that you were targeting for. So that's something that happened to me. And with the person that I was looking ahead to, I was working with in my previous team, I took them on, I asked them to be my mentor, to help me, to coach me through the process of getting into clinical research in the pharmaceutical industry. And point 3, working hard, staying a student, that is imperative. We're all students now. I say since I left uni, I've not stopped learning. I'm in the University of Life now. And in the University of Pharmaceutical Industry, you'll find that every day of work, there is always something new to learn. there's always different people you will experience, which goes on to embody your philosophy. So stand by what you know, stand by what it is that you stand for, and try and see as well whether the companies that you're looking at or companies that you're looking to join, whether they also match your philosophy. You'll see every company has their own values. And I believe as a workforce, we should individually also have our own values. And yeah, point 5 is that every experience counts, whether that is being working in a shop, or whether that is doing some form of retail or hospitality. That experience does count to you working in the industry. Interpersonal soft skills are great, they're important. There will come a time when you will also have to teach someone how to do something. And it would be really great if you could say, you know what, I can empathize, you could sympathize with, or be able to say, you know what, I know, I can kind of see where you've come from. You'll be able to appreciate different points of view when it comes to making big decisions in companies. So points 6 to 10, they are quite open and broad points as well. So points about being flexible and adaptable. In doing so, don't forget to take care of your own back as well. You are a human being, you cannot do everything. And even if it is something you can't complete today, just make sure you mark it as a point to complete tomorrow, and just be assertive in getting that sorted. Similar to what AJ said, actually, is about figuring out the challenges and being a problem solver, be the solutionist. One thing that's really helped me, especially in interviews, is ask, especially if you don't really have any questions to ask, one question you should always ask is, what is the biggest challenge your company is facing right now? Because you'll find at the moment someone's looking for someone to recruit to a company, they actually looking for that person to come in and do something for them. So you asking them what the challenge is will actually help you envision for yourself, okay, can I actually complete this? Can I be a great value, great addition to this team? And next points are, don't be scared to make mistakes, we'll learn and move on. And the final point is to be a mentor. Well, it's to get a mentor, also to be a mentor too. Get a mentor to help you track your progress and celebrate your wins, because there will come times where you may not get a certain job, but always just try and have someone next to you that you can always go to and speak to about the issues that you're facing. You may find that quite a lot of your friends are not in the same industry as you. So having someone who's in there is always going to be beneficial to you. So that's the end of my slides and the end of my presentation. So if there are any questions that you have, feel free to reach out to me. And yeah. All right.
Thank you, Adeola. Thank you. The next speaker will be Nana.
Hi everyone, I just automatically assumed I was going last, don't know why, but hi guys, so my name is Nana and I am a biomedical scientist. I have been for about 7-8 years plus, something like that. First of all, I'll just briefly say what biomedical scientist is, just in case you don't know. So we're basically involved in diagnosis, monitoring, and treatment of disease. And we help basically aid like doctors and nurses with their treatment or diagnosis and their monitoring. And we analyze, like in the UK, we analyze about 150 samples. So if you've been to the doctors and you had your urine taken, your blood taken, or even if you had surgery and had part of some sort of organ taken, we're the people that it comes to, and we basically analyze it. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. There's about 4 to 5 main disciplines in biomedical science. So one is biochemistry, which is what I specialize in, hematology, transfusion, cellular pathology, and cytology. But if you want more details, then yeah, ask me later and I'll let you know. Yeah, so I'll just talk about my journey and how I basically became a biomedical scientist. So I initially, I went to University of Essex, and I started, when I got to my second year, at the end of the first year, we kind of had a rotation at the hospital. We just had to do that as part of the course. And I think at that point I realized that, oh my gosh, if I don't have any experience, then I'm gonna kind of struggle to get into this job. So I then found out that my uni was doing a sandwich course. So I asked people about it and lecturers about it, and it turns out there was a waiting list. So I got on the waiting list, and I think you needed to get at least a 2-1 to be on there, or if anyone dropped out. So lucky for me, someone dropped out and I got on the waiting list. So in my third year, I got a chance to work at a lab for a year, and then got an idea, and I got to do my training. So then I got an idea of what the job's about. Because I think for most people who do biomed, I mean, Ada used to do biomed, most people kind of go in not knowing exactly what it is, or kind of passing through to get somewhere else. And I think it's a very small minority that actually finish the degree and actually do the job. So yeah, for the first time I was like, oh, okay, this is what it's about. So then graduated and had to get registered with a body called Hcpc, which you have to do to be able to, because it's a protected title, to be able to work as a biomedical scientist. And then I started looking for jobs, which took a while. But in that time, I decided to work as a locum. For people who don't know what a locum is, it's another word for it is a contractor. So you kind of work with an agency. So I worked as a locum, as a medical lab assistant in a hospital in London. And although my training was in biochemistry, I couldn't find anything in biochemistry at the time. So I did a little bit of hematology. And and then that led me to get my first role as a biomedical scientist after that, while I was doing that. And after that, I got a job in a private lab, which was quite good for me because it gave me, because it's quite a small team, it gave me the opportunity to learn a lot of different things. So leadership skills, training. I ended up training people on basically point of care machines, which are like little machines that I'm trying not to get too technical, but it's hard. So point of care machines. So the easiest thing I can describe is like maybe say like a glucose meter, where you test for your blood sugar if people have diabetes. So loads of different small machines. I got to train people, got to manage people a little bit, and then kind of worked my way up that way. And luckily for me, that wasn't a chemistry role, but the fact that I worked as a medical lab assistant in a hematology lab, that gave me the advantage of getting that current job, because it was a multidisciplinary job. So I got to do all of them, but I wasn't trained in one department. But I think if you're able to show the willingness that you're ready to learn and happy to learn, then people are likely to give you an opportunity. So I worked there for a while, and then after that I went back into locuming, which meant I moved around loads of different hospitals. And one good thing about locuming is the fact that because you move around a lot, you learn a lot of skills very, very fast, because when you come in as a contractor or a locum, you're expected to know the job and like from day one, just do the job. So locuming has given me the opportunity to just basically learn a lot of different skills really fast. There's no time to like take time training just really, really fast. So yeah, that's my journey. What else? So the other thing I was going to talk about, in case anyone's interested in a day-to-day, you might want to know what you do on a day-to-day job as a biomedical scientist. So I'll probably stick to chemistry because that's my discipline. So the main things that you do is we have these big, massive machines that analyze blood samples. So one of the main roles are basically maintaining these machines and making sure they are working the way they're supposed to work in order to produce results that we want them to work. So we do something called quality control, which basically tests that the machine is working properly and the results that we're putting out are actually correct and accurate in order for the clinician who requested for the test to be able to make an informed decision. And then the other part of it is making sure those results that we're putting out are actually accurate. So there are different, what's the word, what should I use? There are different factors that might affect, let's say, your blood. And as a result of that, we can't release those results. And so it's very important that we make sure what we're sending out are correct and there's no interference, basically. So if you were interested in getting into the role, I don't know why it's quite difficult to get into a role of a biomedical scientist at the moment. It's basically, you need to find, if you've done a degree in biomed or biochemistry, sometimes if you've done like biochemistry or other related subjects, you might have to do top-up modules in order to qualify you to work as a biomedical scientist. But you basically, once you've done your degree, you basically need to find a trainee post. And that trainee post is basically like gold dust. I have no clue why in the country, if you go on like the NHS website, sometimes it's like 2, 1 if you're lucky. So it's quite difficult to get into if you don't. Lucky for me, as I mentioned earlier on, I did it as a sandwich course. So that kind of helped me get straight into it and got my experience and training that way. But if you don't have that opportunity, then it's probably best to either apply for a training role, but it's quite saturated, that market, or apply to be a medical lab assistant and work your way up that way, or kind of wait for the role to come by. Yeah, once you're in there, you have the opportunity to basically work your way up, and there's loads of different things that you can do. You can work your way up into quality assurance, you can work your way up to health and safety, and from there you could divert to any other job, really. Not any other job, but any other relating jobs that you're interested. But I think it's very important, as I think the 2 Ades, because your names are Ades on there, the 2 Ades mentioned that they didn't want to work in a lab. So it's very important that you know that you're happy to work in a lab, or yeah, you probably won't enjoy it. So basically, I like working in a lab, and I don't really like at the moment all the managerial stuff. So if you like all the managerial stuff, then it's easier for you to progress, because once you hit a threshold at a certain point, you can't progress unless you move into managerial work, or unless you move into quality assurance or health and safety, or branch out into something that's more office based, or move into clinical scientists. There's an STP program that you can do. Yeah, and I think that's it for me. If you have any questions, let me know.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nana. So we'll go on to the last speaker, which is Michael, and he has a slide as well. So you can unmute yourself and then I'll get the slides.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's been taking lots of notes from all the speakers, saying a lot of important stuff. I've seen a lot of people talk about mentorship, which is very, very key, as well as placements as well. That's very, very important. So, yeah. So yes, as I mentioned before, my name is Michael. I work at a company called IQVIA, formerly known as Quintiles. So essentially, I work as a functional CMC lead. And actually, when I started off at IQVIA, I didn't actually start off as a functional CMC lead. So I was working as a global CMC lead, and then essentially I worked my way up from that to a deputy functional lead. And as of within the past, I think during this COVID season, then I just moved into this role as functional CMC lead. If you go to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to quickly talk about my journey into regulatory affairs, what is regulatory affairs, and how to become a regulatory affairs professional, and also provide you with some useful links and questions. So I'm hoping if you are interested in going into a career in regulatory affairs, you could just ask Ronke and he'll send you the slides so you can access those links. Next slide, please. So my degree is in biochemistry, and important, as Nana has done as well. So in my third year of uni, I decided I wanted to go on a placement, and my placement wasn't actually in the UK, which was exciting. So I did a placement year abroad in Sweden, in a place called Linköping, and essentially in Sweden, I was able to work as a clinical research scientist, and as well as being involved in a one-year master's course. But in Sweden, in order to complete a master's course, it's actually 2 years. But I was able to get a taste of what the first year was like, and do all the modules and all the learning that goes with it. Graduated in 2012. When I graduated, as you can see, my first role was in 2013, and essentially my thought was to go into clinical. I really wanted to go into clinical trials. The problem was, at that time, it was hard to find a job within clinical. So I literally just started applying to every pharma job that was out there and hoping that I would get one. And in the end, I got one working with a company called the Native Antigen Company, which are based up in Oxford. And when I first started, because of my experience and my placement year, I got this job actually, and I started off as a production scientist. And through that role, I was able to add many other titles onto my role. So I became a QA officer, and I was also sent to a course in King's College to become the biosafety officer for the company. But essentially, I didn't want to work in a lab. And to be fair, during my placement year, I realized I didn't really want to work in the lab. But at the end of the day, beggars can't be choosers, and this was what I could get at the time. And then after that, I was able to sort of move on to working in a recruitment company, because you know what, I said, I don't want to work in a lab anymore, so let me try something else out. So I tried recruitment, and luckily during my time in recruitment, I actually found out that, you know, there's not just things about, you know, there's not just clinical trials, there's also regulatory affairs. And, you know, I speaking to lots of different regulatory affairs professionals, lots of different directors. I got their numbers as well, was always having conversations with them, and they were just telling me about ways and what I needed to do to sort of get into reg affairs. And then luckily an opportunity came up with one of the clients, which allowed me to move to the company with the blessing of my manager within the recruitment company. I was able to work for a company called Diamond, where I started off as a regulatory affairs assistant, and within a few months I was promoted to a regulatory affairs officer. And during this time I learned all the basics about reg, and then after that I decided I wanted to sort of take my career to the next step and move on and sort of focus on a specific area within regulatory affairs, which was CMC. This is when I moved to IQVIA and started working as the global regulatory affairs CMC lead, and now I'm working as the functional CMC lead. Next slide, please. So essentially, I don't know, oops, gone too fast. Is that the right slide? Yeah, it's the right slide. Yeah, so basically, essentially, I'm going to explain quickly what regulatory affairs is. So with regulatory affairs, regulatory affairs is put in place to protect human health, and that is basically subjecting sort of medical, all the medical devices, veterinary products, medicinal products, food supplements, subjecting them to regulations, various government regulations. And essentially, you have the regulatory department. The regulatory department are responsible for ensuring the compliance of various pharmaceutical companies within these various regulations. And we play we are, I would say, an essential part of every single pharmaceutical company or an external company for them if they need to reach out to a CRO, but we play an essential part to basically keep their various products on the market. And within regulatory affairs, we are involved in every single stage of drug development, straight from your clinical trials all through to the products being on the market, and continue on providing our various support. Move to the next slide, please. So yeah, quickly with regulatory affairs, there are 4 types of within regulatory affairs, you have your drug products. So I work in pharmaceutical, and I work with drug products. And in terms of when you want to get these drug products onto the market, there are 4 types of procedures or submissions which you can do. So you have your national procedure, mutual recognition, which is MRP, or decentralized or centralized procedures. National is when you have one product in one market. So for example, I'll say a product such as fentanyl, and I want to register fentanyl in the UK, that would have a national license. For a mutual recognition, so MRP, or decentralized DCP, that would be, I would register that fentanyl in the UK as well as other markets, so France, Germany, Croatia, and Lithuania. With this type of procedure, you have your reference market. Let's say my reference market is the UK, and then the other sort of CMSs who would be Germany, Croatia, Lithuania. So essentially, when a submission is sent out, it would be sent out to all markets, but the initial checks on the registration would be done by the RMS, so the main country, which would be the UK, and that will then filter down to all the other countries that are involved. And then centralized procedures are when you make when a product is registered within every single country within the EU, and then there's one single sort of registration and one single submission for that product, so to get that product registered on the market. There are various ways. There are 2 ways in which you can publish your marketing authorization dossiers, which is Hcpc and NICE. Your Hcpc is electronic common technical document, and the other one is a non-electronic technical document. But everyone is sort of moving into the into using basically publishing their documents electronically. Thank God for that. And as I mentioned before, I work in the CMC area, which stands for Control Manufacturing and Chemicals. And essentially what that is focused on the quality part of the drug product. So when I say the quality part of the drug product, so you're looking at your pharmaceutical development, your stability data, manufacturing process, manufacturing protocol, your different information about manufacturing sites, and storage information as well, how you store how the drug product should be stored. That would contain all the quality information, and that's I would say is the major part of any drug product that's on the market, and that's the part I focus on. And then when I say I work with these different sites to manage their products and provide them with sort of strategy advice that is based on sort of post-approval changes. So if there are any variations that would come through me, I would assess that and provide them with a strategy on how the submission should go, what documents need to be updated, what additional documents that we need to provide. So maybe if they need certificate of analysis on the product, we would include that in. If they need like a justification for the change, or if any of the information on the specification of the drug is changed and we need justification for those specifications, I would obviously also tell them about that as well and work with them to you know, to put that justification together. Next slide, please. And yeah, and then this is just literally information about the product life cycle. As I said, regulatory affairs, in terms of drug development, we play a major role throughout the entire life cycle of the drug product. So you have the part where, you know, advice of the drug product, where it goes into sort of clinical trials. So you have also you have regulatory affairs people who work on the clinical trials side of things, where it's registering drugs for clinical trials and basically following that through. Once that's done, it would move to sort of submitting, once it's gone through the trials and they're, you know, everyone's happy and it's safe for human use and it's ready to go onto the market, it will then, an application would then be created for the drug information of the drug product to get onto the market. And once the drug is on the, once the product is on the market, all the sort of post-approval stuff, we would handle that. So, you know, your variations, with the pharmacovigilance side of things, that was, I believe, when obviously our first speaker, when he was talking about, you know, all that good stuff. This is what's it called? That is that area of focus. Next slide, please. Sorry. So yeah, again, this is everything I was talking about in terms of what we are, what we do, and how we help within the company, within different pharmaceutical companies, so providing them with strategies, advising them on legal or scientific restraints, as well as keeping up to date with the legislation, because the legislation is constantly changing. Next slide, please. So lastly, quickly, how to become a regulatory affairs professional. You can basically, any degree within the life cycle, life science, sector, would take you into regulatory affairs. I would also advise to possibly do a master's in regulatory affairs if possible. There's actually a special master's degree that you can do, which is run in the University of Hertfordshire. So you could take that up, and I would always advise to do placements and internships. This basically increases your chances of getting a role within regulatory affairs, because it's a very small sector and it's very hard to get into. But with you know, the right level of experience and also, you know, the right connections, you're able to actually get into this sector, and it's a very rewarding role in terms of as you move up and move higher and learn more, and you get paid more as well. So yeah, it's really interesting. And also, I would say becoming a member of TOPRA. And TOPRA is sort of regulatory focused. Actually, before you had to pay £25 for undergraduates, but now it's actually free for undergraduates to join once you've graduated and you want to continue with TOPRA. I think it's about 105 annually, or probably more than that. I'm not sure, but I also say attend TOPRA. You can attend. There's so many TOPRA courses that you can attend as well, where you can get some regulatory experience and add that onto your CV, and that would also boost and give you a chance of getting within regulatory affairs. But also, I'd say is, if you want to go into regulatory affairs as well, you need to sort of think if you want to go into the clinical arm of thing, or if you want to go into the post-approval CMC side of thing. So if you, once you read up more about it, you'll see what side or of regulatory affairs might interest you. So yeah, that is all. If you have any questions, and I believe actually on the next slide there's some sort of useful links where you could read up and get some material, and also a useful link on how you can get like membership within regulatory affairs and information about health authorities and so on. But yeah, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Michael. Oh, I had unmuted myself. So those are all our speakers. And do we have any questions? So we're going to move on to the Q&A section. So Tolu, do you have any questions come through?
Yep. So we do have just a few questions. Firstly, this is a question to all the speakers. So if you don't mind, we can just go in the order that everyone's spoken and just answer. The first question was, what are the challenges you have faced as you have progressed in your career? So yeah, we can start with AJ. If you just give us about 2 minutes max for each of you to just, go ahead, AJ.
That's a good question. What are the challenges I've faced in my career? I would say one of the first things that come to mind is I've been fortunate to always work in global roles, but at the same time, working with global roles, you're working with people from different regions and different attitudes to work and different personalities as well. And also working across different time zones has been, quite challenging. So there are days where I have to be up at 6 in the morning for certain meetings, and there are days where I'm, working till quite late as well. And in what I do in process development, I'm looking across the entire scope of the PV process, or pharmacovigilance process, I would say. And I'm not necessarily an expert in every single process underlying for all our pharmacovigilance activities. So it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity, because that gives me the opportunity to go research and learn around different processes, and then trying to look at how we then harmonize those and create lean processes across the entire process. So those two will be, I would say, the key challenges I've faced so far in my career so far. And now I'll pass on to Adeola now.
Yeah. Thank you very much, AJ. Yeah, I was going to mention that as well, actually being a flexible thing, especially when you get into global roles. But just to kind of pick another challenge that I've faced, especially, I think it's got to do with managing the workload, especially as you get on more responsibilities. Now we're in the crisis of the pandemic. There are different demands in the company. So you always have to be mindful of that. Even though you may have a lot of things going on in life, it's always just to be mindful that keep your work kind of compartmentalized and prioritize that work, and make sure you prioritize time for yourself, because you could work 24 hours a day, but you wouldn't be productive. So sticking to your normal working hours is also a great challenge. But always trying to be productive is the best way to go about doing it. Just set aside time to do certain tasks, and that will help you manage your workload.
Thank you, Adeola. And Nana?
I would say two things. So in my role, I say one of the things is shift work. So in one of my roles, I had to be on call, and let's say like on a Saturday, and I could be like in the middle of like cooking dinner or something, and it's like I get a phone call, someone needs transfusion, I have to go. So I think that was quite challenging in like planning life around stuff like that, shift work. But I think at the beginning it's quite good because the money's good, is better, like if you have like night shifts and stuff. And I'll say the other thing, it's a bit of a challenge, but at the same time, I guess it's a bit of a push, which is, so moving up in your role, I think with most of these hospitals, because you're there, people are kind of happy to keep you there. And if you're doing your job well, they're happy for you to do your job well, and you kind of have to wait for an opportunity to apply for the next role up. Whereas if you apply, so that's what I mean in terms of a challenge. But in terms of a push, it kind of gives you an opportunity to apply somewhere else, because there's always jobs elsewhere. So I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of better to just not be afraid that if you're not moving at where you want to be, then just it's fine to move. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Michael?
Yeah. So I share some of the same challenges as everyone else. As well. So the time zones, where obviously I work on a global role. In a global role, you're having to basically fit your time around everyone else's. So with the Indian team, for example, where they start earlier. So once you're on from whatever time, I think maybe I start 8 a.m. and once I'm on, the messages fly in straight away. And if you finish off at like where I finish off at maybe 4:30, and then the American team are just coming on, and then they're asking you questions or trying to get you to do stuff, and then you literally are stuck trying to do what help them out before you head out. And sometimes obviously it takes you some more time, and just knowing how to balance that all out. Luckily, with the company I work for, we have something known as core hours. So once you've completed your hours for the week, you're able to log off early on Friday. So I think we can log off from 2:30 if we're all done and there's no other issues that are coming in on a Friday. So most Fridays I'm able to get that time back. But I would say one of the main challenges that I've also seen is workload. So where I work as a functional CMC lead, I have my workload, which should be 50%, but it's closer to 70%. Then as well as managing all the other CMC leads and any issues that they might have. So it's basically, trying to balance all of that out. So have time to do my workload and have time to immediately respond to any issues or get on to any issues that they have. So an example was yesterday, there was a major issue that a client sent to me, and I read up about that, and I had to literally get on to the CMC lead immediately to try and help out to escalate that situation and get it sorted as soon as possible, even though I had my work to do. And we spoke about it, got that sorted out, and I was able to get onto my work and finish that on time and still finish at a reasonable time. So it's just basically balancing all of that out. So yeah, sorry, I was going to say something else. Someone sent me a message to say something in regards to other challenges. So also, that's right. So with the other challenges as well within reg as well. So the thing is, within regulatory affairs, the regulations are constantly changing. So you need to also keep up to date with that. Keep reading all the legislations that are coming through to make sure that when we are reporting and providing advice to the clients or providing advice to people within the pharma company in another division, we're giving them up-to-date information. So let's say if they're saying you change an I in a document and that change is a minor change, but now the legislation has changed and it's saying no, that change is a major change. Now we need to make sure we know that information, or if we're providing wrong information, by the time it gets to the authority, that costs the company a lot of money, because once you send those dossiers to the authority, you need to make payments, and if there's any issues with that, further payments need to be made. So you need to make sure you're on top of those stuff constantly. But yeah, that's all.
Okay, thanks guys. And it's quite interesting how all the themes were related in terms of time. I think sometimes we don't appreciate once we get into the working world the time constraints that we have and having to balance that with, you know, a normal life. So thank you everyone for answering that. So there's two questions. There's two questions, but I'm going to combine it into one just for time. So this is again to everyone, if you could just answer in the same order again. How would you approach a professional to be your mentor, and when will be the best time to seek out that mentor? So if we start again with AJ, yeah, if you could just give us your 2 cents on that.
So this is a good one, because I've personally done this. So in my final year at university, I was in my third year, just beginning to take my exams. I reached out to, like I said, people who had a similar career path that I envisaged for myself on LinkedIn. I just reached out to them in a casual emails, just starting saying, you know what, I've come across your profile, you've got a similar background to mine. I would love to connect with you to learn more about what you do, and you know how that would help me in my role, as in my search for a role as I'm about to graduate. And a few, I think I sent so many emails, and I think 3 of them got back in touch with me. One of them, we had a few conversations via email, and eventually gave me his number. And that was actually what led to my first job, because he was coaching me through that, and gave me the number of a recruiter who helped me with my role. And in one of those people I actually reached out to as well had a small consultancy up in Essex, and she was happy to have me just come sit down and just observe and learn. So I would say Adeola had something about on his slide about being yourself, being your authentic self. I would say just reaching out to people, not expressively just saying you want a job from them, because the truth of the matter is not all of them are going to be able to be in that capacity to hire you, but just really stating what you want from them, from what you've seen on their profile, and then from there build that relationship with them and see how that can progress with you under their tutelage and under their mentorship, support you with getting a role. I'm not sure if that would help anyone, but I would say that because from personal experience, that is how I got into industry.
Thank you. Adeola?
I agree with everything that AJ just said. Actually, just not being afraid to take a step out. I think when I was first told about getting the mentor, for me, it was really nerve-wracking. It was like, okay, how do I know if this person even likes me, or if this person's really looking out for my interests? I think he said something that was really key, is like, you know, you try and look at someone, you'd be like, oh, does this person kind of look like me? Nowadays, we're all talking and looking at representation in different industries, across media, across everything. And you'll be very surprised, especially in the pharmaceutical industry, we are very, very eccentric. You could probably see from my background, I've got guitars and trainers and stuff. Like, everybody is quite eccentric, and you'll be so surprised you'll find something in common. They may listen to the same kind of music as you, or they may just be interested in the same causes as you. Those are just find bits that you have in common and use them to your advantage to kind of say, you know what, we can kind of, or you can kind of work together here. Or as well, people that you may have previously worked with, although they may not be in the right path that you want to be in, they can kind of help you be a better person, to help you better apply for jobs. So I have a person that will help me look over my CV. I have a person that will help me look for jobs. So when I've checked my CV with one person, I then check it with the person that I've got helping me to look for jobs, and just see, okay, does my CV line up? Does my cover letter match what it needs to be? What kind of skills have I missed out on? Do I need to get any extra training? Those are questions you need to ask actively with every role that you're about to apply for. And they will help you in trying to decide, you know, who could mentor you here. And we don't need to just have one person, you could have more than one as well. Yeah, and that's it. Over to Nana, if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you guys have said so far. I think my experience is a bit different. I think I had quite a few friends who were older than me and were in their professions. I was able to ask them for help and to point me in the right direction. But what I would say is don't be afraid to send out emails and don't be afraid to approach people. Just to go back. So initially I actually wanted to do medicine, and when I did my placement year, I thought that would be a great opportunity to get experience. So I actually got the opportunity to like see a lot of operations being done, like hip surgery, and I basically utilized the opportunity. So don't be scared to like reach out to whoever you think you can gain something from. Really, just send an email, you just never know. Yeah.
Okay, Michael?
Yeah, very, very good question. I agree with what everyone else has said. The way I got my mentors was actually it was unique actually, because it was a time where I had just graduated and I was working in retail, and a guy came in, and I was just having a conversation with him and talking about what I had done in uni and everything. I was like, you know what, I actually like you and stuff. Like, we should go out and actually go out for coffee one time, sit down and just talk and bring your CV and whatnot. So you know, I met up with him in London Bridge, sat me down, went through my CV and started talking, and then talking about my experience and stuff. And he's like, oh, you know what, I don't actually see you working in the lab. I actually see you working more in the office and whatnot, probably more like an administrative role and blah blah blah. So we had a good chat and stuff, and that basically allowed me to sort of set my focus on and got me thinking about where I wanted to be, and yeah, and it was good. And I remember for a while he actually followed my career to keep track of where I was going and giving me advice and interview tips and ways in which I should behave as well, moving forward for the type of roles I wanted to go for. And then the second person was as I said, so when I found out about regulatory affairs, and I started speaking to this director, he gave me I had his number anyway because I was working in recruitment, but he was okay for me to call him outside of work, and we were constantly having conversations, and he was telling me on stuff I need to do. He was actually giving me a lot of these reading materials to go and brush up and get some information about regulatory affairs. And yeah, he followed my career as well for quite a while, and yeah, gave me quite a few more tips. And he was actually the one who I think he told me to go and do a PhD as well, but yeah, luckily I didn't have to do that. But yeah, I'll say having a mentor is really, really key, because it allows you it makes the path a bit more clearer. Someone who's been there before can assist you as much as they can on your journey. And I would say it's not just about getting a mentor as well. It's all about getting the right mentor for you, to guide you on your journey and where you see yourself moving forward. But yeah, I hope I answered correctly.
Yeah, thanks. That was quite valuable. I liked what you said, Michael, about getting the right mentor. So yeah, hopefully, we get more people sharing stories about how they can mentor people, or how they've been able to mentor people as well. So yeah, the last question for everyone, because obviously everyone's quite specific in what they're doing. So this question was asking, what extra courses would you encourage graduates to do that helps you, or that can help you get into your specific areas? So if we can start again from AJ and then run it all the way through to Michael.
It's a good thing, because when Michael was giving his talk, I was actually writing a few down that came to mind. So I think a couple that I was thinking about was actually, if you have anyone in your final year now, the good thing with the internet is you can start taking some of these courses online. So for drug safety, you can look up the EU2P, and they have certain modules that cover both drug safety, pharmacovigilance, and also one of the areas I never even mentioned was pharmacoepidemiology. And that's another area that, I'm not sure many people are aware of that they can pursue careers in. So the EU2P definitely is one that you can look at. And they're also, I would say they're quite affordable as well. and because you can select the modules. You can also do a full-time master's and PhD with them, but if you're just looking at certain aspects that you want to do, if it's PV, pharmacoepidemiology, or even things like risk management, that would be a good place to start. Another professional organization that I would recommend is the DIA. You can also get membership with them, but I would say to start with, maybe just do some of the initial introductions that they have to either drug safety or to signal management, because that's another interesting area for some people coming into drug safety. The University of Hertfordshire, and I would say I think it's Portsmouth, also do master programs in drug safety, and I think they're the only two in the UK currently that do that. And those are the, if you want to go via the formal education path, you can also choose either of those options as well.
Okay, thank you. Adeola?
I would say, first off, for myself, I didn't do any supplementary, actually I did one supplementary course, and that was because I thought I wanted to become a CRA. So that's a clinical research associate, and they're known as the monitors that will go around to different hospitals and check how they're doing on a clinical trial. So they'll go around, assess the labs, assess the pharmacy, assess the actual site, speak to the actual chief doctors as well in the hospitals, and just try and just make sure that they're adhering to the protocol and doing the clinical trial as they should. But some extra courses that I would actually recommend, is some stuff I probably wish I looked into a lot earlier in my career, was the Hcpc, so Institute of Clinical Harmonization and Global Clinical Practice. So global clinical practice is really just important for everyone throughout the life sciences. I would say it's just about keeping the integrity of clinical trials, and also monitoring just making sure that it's safe for the patient. There are certain things that we need to consider. We may just get really quirky ideas in the pharma world, and when we really look at the Hcpc, it will actually kind of say, you can't really do that if we're going to jeopardize this part, or it's going to be really tough for the patients, or if there's more costs for the patient, like if it's more dangerous for the patient than it is beneficial, we need to weigh those risks as well. So it gives you a really great insight into how clinical trials work, and the entire world of that. So it will actually really help you in interviews as well. If you know those GCP bits, they'll be really, really impressed. Another thing I'd say I would recommend as well is to look into research associate programs. So you may find companies that are CROs like PRA Health. I think Quintiles back in the day, they used to do this, but maybe IQVIA do this now. But have a look and look out for CROs. They are contract research organizations, and they are the kind of like side companies that big pharmaceuticals will hire to manage and operate clinical trials in different countries. So they may have programs that will kind of get you in to shadow people who are on the go monitoring sites, or just shadow in the office, see how different levels of clinical research work. The third thing I'd recommend is actually looking at internships as well, specifically to pharmaceutical companies. You can look directly at them and just go on their website and just search for internships that they have, and just get applying. Just try and figure out if there's any person that's reachable within your network that is associated, and as well, just tell them that you want to learn a bit more. You could actually just come into the office with some people and just shadow them at work. And then before you know, there may come a time when there's a job, and they know that they've seen you at work, they know that you fit into the environment, you know what it is, and it will be really just a smooth transition for you. And then another thing I would recommend is looking into more project management stuff, which is what I do mainly. Courses like the Prince 2, you may hear about it. It's quite generic across different industries as well. So even if it's not just life sciences you want to get into, it's really, really, really useful. So Prince 2 is the last bit. And then as well, you could also try and get a master's in clinical research as well. That will really, really help your knowledge. But experience is paramount, and that's what ideally we look for in recruiting people. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, Nana?
So with my field as a biomedical scientist is actually quite specific. So in terms of career progression, you usually start off as a biomedical scientist. And if you wanted to move up, you'd have to do something called a specialist portfolio. And that's something you can only really do in the lab. You can't get an extra course for it or anything. You can only do it in the lab, which allows you to move up a band if you're familiar with the NHS banding system, or some people call it grades. And the one thing that could help you is doing a master's, because once you've completed a specialist portfolio, if you have a master's, that allows you to kind of move up to, in a way, gives you a bit more responsibility. So I think it's essential that you really, really think about what exactly you want to get from biomed, because as I said earlier, you can branch out, and within the job, sometimes you do get opportunities to do other courses like quality management or health and safety or risk assessment. And that's where you get those extra courses. But I think if you choose to do biomed, you have to be very, very clear as in where you want that career to take you. The other thing that you can also do, is an STP program, which I think is called Scientific Training Program, which allows you to become a clinical scientist, and you can kind of work your way up from there to become a consultant. I think that's a 3-year course, and that's very, very competitive to get into. So I think it's important to know what you want to get out at the end of it before deciding on what course to top up with, basically. Yeah. That's it.
Thanks, Nana. And last but not least, Michael.
So as I mentioned before on my slide, so there's some useful links that you could check, but the main one is TOPRA. So actually, sorry, before I go on, I just need to, so what Adeola said about clinical trial programs in IQVIA. Yes, we do have them in place. Obviously, I don't know that much about them because I'm not in the actual sector, but we do have programs in place where when you go on to, then you get all the right training. I think at the end of it, you could become a CTA, so clinical trial assistant, or a CMO, which is clinical monitoring operated, something like that. But anyway, yeah, but we do have those type of programs in place at IQVIA. Unfortunately, we don't have regulatory affairs programs in place. The thing is, with regulatory affairs, it's difficult to get into. I think most people that it's difficult to get into, but it's not, you can still get into it. So if you've done like courses, like so the TOPRA course, that is the main recognized course amongst every single company. And once you get this training on regulatory affairs, then you could then sort of move on to sort of applying to different jobs. But the first role that you would want to start off with, it would be a regulatory affairs assistant or regulatory affairs associate. And the good thing is, once you get an interview, then obviously, because you've done the course with TOPRA and you have a good understanding of regulatory affairs, then you could show that within your interview, and therefore hopefully get the job. And also, it's also good actually to have some form of lab work as well before going into reg, because essentially when you're working on so if you're working on with small molecules or biological, small molecule products or biological products, you you get like a better technical aspect of that, so the better information about the manufacturing, so therefore you can move into the CMC part in terms of technical dossier writing as well, from scratch, because you've worked on the manufacturing site, you know how it works, you know how the manufacturing process goes, and obviously within reg you could get the sort of level of training understanding on how to write regulatory documents. So it would be good to get the manufacturing experience before going into reg, or just go straight into reg. But I would say if you definitely want to go in now, you would have to start from a regulatory affairs assistant, and then or regulatory affairs associate, and then work your way up. And the thing is with reg, because it's such a small it's a small group, so everyone knows everyone, so you also need to you build relationships basically with people, because what from a lot of the stories I keep hearing is, oh, I moved to this company because obviously I knew this manager or this director and they were working there and they recommended me because they knew me and then brought me in. And that's how you're able to sometimes get higher and higher within regulatory affairs. It's basically people putting in a good word and then bringing you in, and then just jumping a few interview steps and maybe just getting one interview and getting into the role. So yeah, but I would say definitely check out the useful links which I provided, but Topra is your go-to for any training, and there are also sort of other there are other links from you can get from Glassdoor, ProClinical, that talk about, you know, how to get jobs and what more information about what regulatory affairs is. So yeah.
Sorry, can I just say something real quick as well before I forget? Because I think I'll be doing you guys a disservice if I don't say this. So the field of drug safety pharmacovigilance is actually really changing, and it will look very different in the next few years. So anyone coming in newly, I would say definitely look up courses in artificial intelligence, automation, deep learning, NLP, anything to do with big data analytics, because that's where the future is going. And so if you're coming in already with those skill sets, that puts you apart from anyone else. That if I look at job applications, that you don't see a lot of that, but that's where the industry is going. And so if you can anticipate that and build those skills now, I think you would definitely get a head start in the next few years.
Thank you, Michael and AJ, for that. So we have one last question in chat, and that's actually specifically for Nana. So this person asks, are there any other ways to get your Hcpc registration other than being a biomedical scientist? I think that's what they're asking. Nana, do you get the question?
I'm trying to understand it. So can you say that again?
So are there other ways to get your Hcpc registration other than, I think, other than being a, they didn't complete it, but I think they probably mean being a biomedical scientist, or I think other than being a trainer, right?
Trainee, other than being a trainee biomedical scientist.
Unfortunately, that's the only route. You can't get Hcpc registered until you've completed the training. I think it's because throughout that training, you have to complete a portfolio, and that's in a way showing that you have the knowledge and the application to actually do the job. And so without that portfolio and without that trainee, it's impossible to be registered with the Hcpc. Yeah, you have to be trained first.
I think what they meant is, because I know that with a lot of students or graduates who want to become biomedical scientists, they can't get a trainee post. But is it possible to maybe, I don't know, work as a lab assistant and do your portfolio there? Or is there any other way of getting your Hcpc registration without having that title of a trainee biomedical scientist? I think that's probably.
Well, the best way, because it's so difficult to get a trainee post, the best way would be to go in as a medical lab assistant, or there's something called an associate practitioner, but there's not a lot of jobs as an associate practitioner. It's just slightly above medical lab assistant. but I definitely recommend that as the best way. Before I got my registration, although I had done my trainee post, that I was able to get a locum post as a medical lab assistant. And I think if you can get a locum, you do need a little bit of lab experience, but it's a lot of like labeling and checking and stuff like that. So I think if you can display, have those skills, you can get it with an agency, which allows you to learn on the job really, really fast. But yeah, I'd recommend doing medical lab assistant first. And then once you're in there, sometimes it's easier to then speak to people and see what's the best step to take. I actually know one girl that I used to work with who was a medical lab assistant and literally waiting and waiting for a trainee post to come up. In the end, I think when she spoke to Hcpc, or there's another organization called the IBMS, they said that if her lab were willing to like look over her work and the portfolio, then at some point she might be able to qualify. So although she was a medical lab assistant, she was able to do a portfolio, apply for it. Because the portfolio can only be applied for by whoever, how do I say it, by the organization. So if you're working for a hospital, they're the only people that can really apply for it for you. You can't just, you can see a copy online, but you can't just get your hand on it. So the best way is medical lab assistant, really.
Okay.
Sorry, I do have one question. I know it's 8 o'clock, and if all the speakers could just give a very, very, very brief answer, that would be great. So it's just in regards to the initial question. So the initial question was, what are the challenges you have faced in progressing in your role? But could you answer the question, what are the challenges you faced getting into your role? I hope that was clear.
After graduating.
After graduating, yeah. So we can start with AJ.
Challenges faced getting into the role, I would say it would be, first of all, because pharmacovigilance is a niche area, without any experience, it was very difficult. And you don't have placements like, I didn't go on a placement or anything like that. So I had to make my own opportunity. I had to reach out to people to create my own role, and also to demonstrate that I had an understanding of what I will be doing in the industry as an entry-level role in processing adverse events. So I had to go, I didn't do it myself, but I had to go sit in a consultancy with someone, look at the database, understand what they were doing in the database, so that when I had an interview, I could talk around that and demonstrated that understanding. Unfortunately, there was no other way to get that practical experience and get into the industry. And I would say that's a shame, because it's not a field that many people can just use the degree, the understanding of the degree, to translate into that. Personally, and this was what, 8-9 years ago, so personally that was my challenge at the time. I guess it's slightly different now, but back in the day it was quite difficult because it was quite a niche area.
Yeah, thanks for that, AJ. Yeah, it's actually a thing. Similarly to me with clinical research, one of the main challenges that I faced trying to get into my first job was that I didn't have the experience. It's that catch-22. They want you to have some sort of experience in it, and before you've even gotten into the role. And with that, it actually just pushed me further to trying to find people who are in the industry already. What experience do I need to get? What is it that I really, really need? And what I found for myself particularly was that it was skills that they needed. So it was just, if I could show in the interview, I could show in my application that I have the skills required to perform the role, that would help me a lot. And even on that note, actually, if it's all right, I can mention this. I'm also part of this company called blackpharma.org. So what we do is we help people like ourselves to help with representation in the clinical research industry. We know it's not easy, especially to get your first role. Nowadays, it's really, really, really difficult. But with people coming together as professionals in clinical research and saying, okay, you know what, I can help mentor you, or if there's a role coming in my company, I already can see the skills that you have and I'm able to recommend you. We help each other with that as well. So if there are any people looking as well for internship roles or looking to get their first role in clinical research, having to apply all over the place. You may get called to work in a different city for your first role, but that's stuff that you kind of have to be prepared for in the beginning. So that's, I think, one of my greatest challenges. But check out blackpharma.org and register for yourself as well. And you get hooked up with a mentor and someone to help you through applying into clinical research roles. And they're all people in the industry already. So, yeah.
I think the challenge I faced was like getting my first role. I think first of all, although I had the trainees, I had that 1 year training experience, I wasn't Hcpc registered yet, so no one even wants to look at your application. There's just like no point, because no one wants to be liable with someone who's not registered, as it is a protected title. The other thing is, although I had that 1 year's training experience, in that training experience, you're almost working as a medical lab assistant, and it's very, very limited tasks that you can do. So I ended up going on a lot of interviews, because transferring, it's different from when you're actually doing something to when you're actually watching someone do something. So in the training year, I spent a lot of time watching people do stuff and not actually doing it. And so when it came down to the interviews, because I didn't have that practical experience of physically doing it, I struggled a little bit. So I think the way to get past that would be perhaps to speak to people who are in the profession and ask them like what kind of interview questions you get asked and stuff like that, and hopefully that might help. Yeah.
The first thing I'll start off with is I'll say, don't give up. As Nana mentioned as well, I had 1 year's placement experience. I thought, you know what, I'm gonna get my job within within a few weeks or a month of, after graduation. Funny enough, I had a lot of my friends around me who got a job immediately. Like I said, I wanted to go into clinical trials. So essentially, I was focused solely on sort of looking for clinical trials roles. I think I was applying for jobs and going to interviews for 13 months. I went to over 20 plus interviews all around England, the UK. I think I went to as far up as Yorkshire for interviews. I haven't got interviews for like 2 jobs, so 2 interviews in 1 day. It wasn't the easiest, but in the end, I continued. Obviously, I have a degree. I have a year's experience. I didn't give up, but it got to the stage where I decided, okay, you know what? I have a year's lab experience. Maybe I actually need to focus more on getting a lab role, and basically working my way up. So I said, I think I created a strategy. Go in, working in the lab space, and then work my way up to move out of that and go into clinical if that's what I wanted to go into. So essentially what I did, I went into working in a lab, worked for 1 year. Then I was able to move out of that and go into recruitment. And when I went into recruitment, that is when I found my dream role, which within regulatory affairs. And because I was within, in a company where we had clients that come to us for us to recruit for them, it was a step easier, where I could basically get my director to speak to the company, and because they had an assistant role, and they spoke to them, told them about my experience and what I had done, and was able to basically give me a 3-month trial. And I believe actually within that 3 months, it was a 3-month temp role, And within a month and a half, they had made it permanent because they had seen my determination to succeed within that role. So again, I go back to what I said in the beginning: don't give up, keep going, know where you want to be, and if you don't know, go back to square one and start again, and your true path will show its face. And just follow the course and keep going, and you will get to where you should be going, or the right path in which you should be on. But just stay focused. That's all.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you all for answering the questions and for speaking and just sharing your journey with us all. So we've come to the end of our first ever online event, and yeah, we're just so happy to have you guys as speakers and just share information, share your journey with us. So just before we all log off, just for the remaining participants, just to let you know that, and even for the speakers as well, I'll be sending out some feedback forms to you guys probably tomorrow morning. And then just, you can fill it out whenever you can, just so that we know, what we can change, or if there's anything else that, we can add to make these events more useful. And yes, that is it. Thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of your evening.